So, Matthew, we thought that we'll talk about house hacking today. I didn't want to talk about interest rates, to be honest.
I'm done. I'm bored.
We have been, talking about interest rates for a long time. I think we need to be a little more creative because we can't control interest rates. They'll go up. What do we do, right? So just we can't do anything, right? And a lot of people I'm seeing now, and that I do a lot of first-time home buyers. I'm seeing a lot of this stress test is actually getting very stressful, and people are not able to qualify for houses now. We are now looking at almost 6.57% on the stress test. And we need to find different ways of, enter the market. Even if the market has declined, stress test is actually becoming very stressful for people, right?
When it first was introduced back in 2018, and a lot of people don't know, stress test is relatively new in the grand scheme of Canadian real estate. It came in 2018 with a whole bunch of legislation called B20, right? And it really was, we were entering a period of all-time lows in interest rates. We were already sitting at 3s, 3.5s, right? Which up until that point had been historically really, really low. And the government's like, okay, we've got to put something in play because they're not always going to be this way. Well, now we're at a point where interest rates are back to normal and the stress test is now causing more harm than good. So we'll see what happens. The legislative body moves slowly, but there is a lot of noise regarding this and how it's making things completely unaffordable and standing in the way of the mandate of the insurers, which is to provide access to housing for first-time home buyers primarily.
Absolutely. Just from a definition standpoint, when I heard this about house hacking, this was after I bought my condo, to be honest, and I didn't know that I was house hacking then. So house hacking is nothing but house hacking is a strategy that involves becoming a landlord and renting out portions of your primary residence to generate income. I have seen so many people do this now in Ontario. It's not as common in the main, like hubs like Mississauga and, all that. But I still see a lot of people who have bought properties with rentable basements. So let me just give an example of, this is a perfect example. This is actually a real example of one of my friends who bought it in Calgary. So he bought a $500,000, just shy of $500,000 duplex. He bought it with a down payment of $25,000. The closing costs in Calgary are amazingly low because there's no land transfer tax. So you actually kind of, $27,000 and you move into the house, right? Obviously, you have to buy furniture and stuff like that. And now what he did was, obviously, his payments were a little bit higher because interest rates have increased. Now his payments were about $2,200. Now the payments are about $2,500. But overall, with the rent coming from basement, he's just spending $1,675. And earlier, him and his wife were, paying about $1,600, $1,500 in rent. And now with the rentable basement, they are living in a good 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 1,800 square feet to themselves. Their parents are living with them, and they have an entire, basement suite. Now, what he did this summer, after he bought this house, and then he saw that the interest rates are increasing, just to compensate for that, he wanted to try something new. And he said that because he's in Calgary, he said that let me just Airbnb it. And he Airbnb'd it at $75 a night. He was able to Airbnb for 3 months for an average of 24 nights. And he earned anywhere between $1,600 to $1,900 a month in net profit. Because Airbnb actually charges, there is a cleaning fee and everything. You can actually charge it separately. So he was able to make anywhere between $1,500 to $1,900 a month for 3 months that he did Airbnb, and he's continuing to do that now. And his overall expenses after everything, mortgage and everything, despite the increase in interest rates, he was able to just get it down to under $1,100. And he's living almost, I won't say mortgage free, but he's not paying a lot for a big house that he's living in right now. And that basically is the true essence of, what house hacking can do for you. There are people who actually rent out upstairs units and live in the basement as well. So you would have those kind of people who will be living there for almost, no mortgage. I see a lot of singles do that, or renting out other rooms in the house. Obviously, you can't do it legally, but there are people who are house hacking, like on short-term, medium-term rental. And yeah, it's just this thing that you can do now more than ever because the prices are just more conducive. right now to do this kind of a house hack. So, Matthew, I know that this is not new. Any stories around, what's the craziest that you have seen, when it comes to house hacking?
I'm not sure if we're going to really talk the craziest, but let's talk about the most typical that we see, right? Which, so when we're looking at it from a lender's point of view, right? When we're looking at it from the insurer and from the bank's point of view, there's really only one form of house hacking that's okay. Mm-hmm. And that's either illegal or an illegal, and I'll explain the terminology and why they're called legal or illegal, basement suites in an owner-occupied home or duplex, okay? And then the difference between a legal or an illegal suite is essentially whether it's a duplex or single-family home with a basement suite, right? It has to do with how it's metered, how it's been set up for utilities, not that, I'm breaking the law by putting it here, right? From a lender's point of view and from a financing point of view, there's three things that we have to make sure are in play to use income from a secondary suite, right? It needs to be self-contained with a separate entrance, right? At no point can I get from my unit to their unit without having to go outside the property to get to it, right? Or leave my property to get to it. There has to be locked doors in between the two homes, okay? There needs to be a full bathroom and kitchen, okay? So, you need to have some sort of cleaning facility in the bathroom. So there needs to be a shower or a bathtub, right? And bathtub and sink, right? And then you need to have a straightforward kitchen, cooking facilities, hot plates don't count generally. You need to be able to get an oven and a fridge in there, okay? With sink, running water, all that hooked up. And then third, there has to be a plausible escape plan. So if you're in the basement, the windows should be large enough for someone to squeeze their ass out of it if there's a fire. Okay? There always needs to be a secondary escape from the basement, okay? If you have those three things in play, most lenders will let you use somewhere between half to full amount of that rental income to offset the carrying cost of the property, right? And this can be dramatic in some cases, So, Kitchener, there's almost a blueprint for this type of house, right? Mm-hmm. They're one-story bungalows with full-size basements with rear or side entrances, right? And it's like somebody went through old Kitchener and just kept stamping this design of house everywhere, and they're phenomenal, right? So you can buy anything like that with as little as 5% down. Right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's another example that I wanted to take, and this is again a real example. I was actually doing it with a client. This is in Ottawa. So we had a limited down payment of $65,000. So we were looking at doing a 10% down on a $650,000 townhouse. And this was a couple of months back. So we obviously, have bought for a much lower price and a semi-detached now. But the point here is that you can actually play around with house hacking to get your payments actually lower or your expenses lower. So, let me just take an example of a townhouse at $650,000 with the same down payment versus a semi-detached with a separate entrance and a rentable basement. Now, the expenses for this kind of a house with a 10% down at 4%, interest rate variable will be 3,184 for the mortgage and property tax, utilities, insurance. It will be a total monthly expense of 3,834. Again, you are staying in this house, and obviously there's no rentable basement, and your total expenses for this house is 3,834 as of today. But if you buy a semi-detached house with a rentable basement already constructed, now that's where I think we had to get the client to think, in these terms, because they were very hell-bent upon buying not more than 650. And even if it makes sense to buy 800 because they did afford from an income point of view, we were not looking at this calculation. And certainly when we looked at it, it made sense. Now, yes, the mortgage payment will be higher, 3,918. You'll have property taxes, utilities, insurance will be higher because now there are certainly, 2 units here. Your overall expenses look very high at $4,700. However, there's a rentable basement fully furnished, just like Matthew said, and it's getting us $1,400. And our overall expenses, $4,700 minus $1,400 comes down to $3,300. So even if you are taking on more loan, if you just look at, this particular comparison, you will see that it's a no-brainer to go for a semi-detached if we income qualify. So that's where I think we should, and I always talk about rule of 35 and knowing your numbers and everything, but we need to be a little more creative in certain markets wherein you can actually buy a little bit more. And what's interesting is, and I did touch upon the lenders, who actually take. So for instance, if you're buying a $650,000 house, you'll need roughly in the range of about $130,000 of gross income. Obviously, it depends on the stress test and the interest rate at the time of buying. If you're buying an $800,000 house, you'll need $165,000 of income if there's no basement, but if there's a rentable basement, you actually need $20,000 lower to qualify, because the rent that's coming $1,400 multiplied by 12, that will be added back to your income 100% of the times, and there are lenders who will do that. So certainly you require less income because you're actually getting income from the basement suite to compensate for that. So yeah, this is just one other real example where we need to be a little bit strategic when it comes to house hacking.
Absolutely. So then there's another form of acceptable finance out there, and it's called contributory, right? Okay. And so contributory is a really interesting form of income that exists in the market. And what it is it's someone who's not on title, but resides in the home and contributes income towards the expenses of the home. And there are lenders out there now that will allow contributory incomes in play. And now what they typically do is they typically limit the total sum of that. So some lenders might be at $500 a month, some might be at $1,000 a month. But what you have to do is you have to show this person is going to be living with us and this person makes this much money, right? So we have to debt service them as if they were part of the deal, right?
Yeah.
But we don't include their liabilities, right? And they don't go on title, right? Yeah. And this tends to work with extended family. So, my cousin might be coming to live with me. We're showing that this agreement's in play. There's a rational reason why they're going to be living with us. They work at this job, make this amount of money. Can we use an extra $1,000 a month to offset the cost of the mortgage on this property? Right. So that's another way to work with, and more limited in your lender selections there, but some of the ones that we deal with regularly do look at contributories.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. And there are other ways, I think, right? So we just don't necessarily need to look at lenders. We also need to look at how to offset our increasing costs because of interest rates. So I think renting out parking spots. So this is not something that the lenders will take into account. Yeah. But my tenant, for instance, at the condo, because the rents have increased, they are actually, they don't have a car. So they are just, renting out the parking space, which even I could have done, if I was doing it, but they are renting it out for $150 a month. And that's one way of how they are reducing their rent, but we can do similar with our mortgage as well. Now, there are some places where you can actually have an ADU. For instance, Windsor is very open to ADUs. You just need to understand the zoning laws, and that therefore, it's very important to work with realtors and people who understand the zoning laws. Windsor is one. Windsor is amazing when it comes to ADUs. If it's a laned house, it's not very difficult to get permits, and any which ways, Windsor has some of the best rental yields. And if you add an ADU to it, you can actually make a killing, especially in this market. This one is my favorite, a live-in burr or a flip. You just buy a house. It doesn't look pretty. You just move into it. You make it look pretty. You live in there for 1 year. And then you just put it on rent, and the rents will be a lot higher because you have made it look pretty. Or you just flip the property and make a profit out of it, right? So that's one thing that we did with our condo. Our condo was really smelly when we went there, right? The floor was bad. The house was like, one of the rooms was painted mustard, like dark yellow, and the bathtub was really dirty, like really, really dirty. It was unusable, right? And we just, I think we spent like $3,000 doing everything. And suddenly the value of that property increased by about $30,000. And we just put it on rent, and we got a much better rent than the previous, owner was getting. So that's another, way. And then this is something that I'm seeing. I'm doing my second deal now. Where two friends are actually buying together because they went to university together. They didn't qualify on income, and they said, what? Let's just buy it together, live in it for a couple of years, and then split equity when the property appreciates.
Yeah, so this is something we're seeing a ton of, actually, is and it's called non-spousal or non-related purchasers, right? And for the longest time, up until about this year, lenders had always used the term spouse when it came to multiple people purchasing homes together, right? You're either spouses or you're guarantors and co-signers, right? Now what we're seeing is a lot of non-related dual borrowers as a thing, right? Where both are entitled, both are contributing, both are expecting to live there, right? And they will have an agreement based upon their contribution typically, and this is done at the lawyer's end, right? What their percentage ownership is. So when it comes time to either sell the property, one buys out the percentage, or they split the equity and go their separate ways, right? We're also seeing a lot of unrelated co-signers.
Unrelated co-signers. Okay, that's interesting.
And this is another thing that's coming into the market a bit, and it's a little bit higher risk, right? But do I have, instead of it being typically your applicable co-signers are grandparents, parents, siblings, right? Now what we're seeing is, okay, but can my friend co-sign for me? Because they make great money and it works. Well, yes, this is a potential out there. However, there is this large amount of due diligence that's done on the files, right? And as someone who might be co-signing, you want to make sure that you're putting protections in place. I would never co-sign for a loan that didn't have creditor insurance on it, first and foremost, right? Because if you co-sign for anything, you may only have 1% of the equity, but you have 100% of the risk.
Yeah.
Right. So you want to make sure that you've taken every step possible to protect yourself and to protect your co-signer. Right. So never look at a co-signer without putting some form of insurance into play.
Got it. Another question, this is interesting. Is it legal to build a separate basement in row freehold townhouse? Now, what I'm just going to rephrase this. Is it legal, and I don't know if we are the right people to ask this, but is it legal to build a separate basement where the entrance is from the garage?
So the question is really, what is the status of the townhouse? Most townhouses are condos. Right. Very few townhouses are actually freehold. When you're dealing with a condo, you cannot make external alterations to the property. Right. So there won't be any building that exit, right? Also, adding an exit to a property is a big job, right? So make sure that the property itself is capable of taking those kind of changes, right? So that's where you do definitely consult with an engineer before even going down that road, right? If it's freehold, right? You should be allowed to make those kind of changes, right? So it just depends what the structure of the internal of the building looks like and whether it can actually take, adding the basement in, The other thing to do too is if you can afford to qualify for the loan on your own, nothing says that you can't go in, build a basement suite and rent out that or anything else. It's just, it's not going to help you qualifying with the mortgage at all.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Most of the basements here in Edmonton are illegal with side entrance, no separate heating. So what are the odds of getting into legal trouble if city gets to know someone is renting illegal basement?
It's not legal trouble. It's just not, they use the term illegal, but it's not like legal, like I'm going to court type thing. It just has to deal with the status of it. It's not considered a separate legal entity on its own.
Yeah.
Okay. Duplexes, you can actually Consider the two units separate entities and you can divide them from each other. That's where the legal sense comes from. An illegal unit, I cannot separate the entities into individual parcels and sell them in unique pieces. Okay. So it has to do with the legal name, the titling, all that stuff, not laws. Okay.
Got it. All right. So Jimmy has a question. Does house hack work for the second time buyers? Will love to see an example considering 20% scenario, etc.
with 20% down, you can do all kinds of house hacks, like far more house hacks than you could with 10 or 5 or whatnot, right? Because the insurer's out of the picture. Now we can actually look at rental income, like it's a thing, because all rental properties have to have 20% down, right? When you're financing them as a purchase on a rental. Keep in mind, like, you don't need 20% down for your second home.
Yeah.
I can keep buying 5%, 5%, 5%, 5% as often as I want, right? If
I can qualify, yeah.
As long as I can qualify. So, once we're dealing with rentals and 20% purchases, there's a whole different set of rules out there, because now I can use alternative financing. Now I can use private financing, right? Now I'm not limited to just bank financing or just monoline financing. And these lenders are creative, right? And they've got all kinds of options out there, right? So, as we increase our down payment, our options expand, right?
Absolutely. I believe everyone has a question on the 5% down for a second home. Would be great if you can address, or another video whenever time permits. Okay, let me just take this one, Matthew, for a minute, and then you can just
absolutely.
Okay, so when we say that we can buy, so there's a very big myth out there that you can buy, it's a first-time home buyer advantage that you can buy with 5%. It's not a first-time home buyer advantage, it's an owner-occupied advantage. So if you're buying a house for yourself, whether it's your first house or 10th house, you can buy at less than 20% down. Now, if it's 5% for the first 500,000, obviously it'll be 10% for the remaining amount, amount over 500. But you can buy if you're buying for yourself. However, you have that very, very sleek box that you need to fit in. Yes. You have to income qualify. There are no exceptions on GDS and TDS and ratios. It has to fix in that insurer box. So therefore, if you are, for instance, earning $200,000, you bought your first house and you have an $800,000 mortgage, and now you want to buy another house of $1 million at 5% down, that's not possible. Because you exhausted your ability to buy, or take that much loan and take another insured mortgage just because you bought a very expensive first house. However, if that same couple who was earning 250 bought a $450,000 condo, and then now looking to buy an $800,000 house with the same 5%, yes, you might qualify. And we'll then need to do numbers. So it all depends on your income. You need to be eligible for that. And it all depends on how much you are buying. Are you just exhausting your entire limit in your first house or not? So I have one question, Matthew, just coming back to house hacking. So like in Ontario specifically, like which markets do you think are good for a house hack? Because I think location is very, very important. Trying to, house. So which markets do you see?
Absolutely. So it depends when it comes to house hacking, how different cities have constructed their homes. Is a big deal. And can you find these kind of footprints, right? So exactly the footprint I'm talking about when I talk about the basement rental style, right? You've seen enough properties in KW that look like this, right? So where else do these properties exist, right? Is the big question. Well, Etobicoke is great. Etobicoke has tons of these properties, right? If I had to choose between different parts of Toronto, if I'm looking to build that kind of a home, I'm going to go in Etobicoke. Okay. Again, KW is just, Kitchener in particular is gorgeous when it comes to having these properties. East end of London, specifically the east side of London. It's an older community and you see a lot of these bungalow builds there, right? South, west, north doesn't have them. Okay. Windsor's great. Windsor did multi-units. Right? They did a lot of multi-unit construction, right? There was a focus point there. So that's a great market. It's just within these cities, which locations exist that are the most opportune to do it, right? And this is where a local realtor matters.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, for instance, in Kitchener, not all locations which would have a duplex would actually work. Same way, Brampton, that's a big area for new immigrants when it comes to, basement rentals. Not all areas work, right? So it's important to have that local knowledge and the zoning knowledge as well, in case, you're buying something that doesn't have a basement unit, but you can build one. So it's really important, to look at that. There's an interesting couple of questions here on Airbnb arbitrage. What are your views about Airbnb arbitrage?
It's not something I've looked into. It's not something I'm interested in doing. It's that's the one where you use other people's properties, right?
Yeah, so you basically rent out a unit and then sublease it.
That sounds like part of the problem, not part of the solution to me. When it comes to housing, that really sounds like part of the problem to me. My number one rule, when it comes to investing, and this is I live and die by this, is I will always put more inventory into the market than I take out. And I feel like converting things to arbitrage that aren't yours is taking more property out of the market than I'm putting into it, and so that breaks my rule number one on investing. Yeah.
But arbitrage is, you need to understand, it's not passive, right? It can make money, but it's active money. Like, it's a job. If you'll make rent payments no matter what, right? So even if the unit doesn't work out, so it's a job. I've seen people make money, but again, location matters a lot here. If you put 5% down for an owner-occupied property and decide there for some time, is there a time frame listing on how much minimum time?
The expectation is that you occupy a property for a minimum of 12 months before you find a new one.
Yeah.
You can't really do anything with real estate inside 12-month windows. And this has a lot to do with fraud protection.
Yeah.
Right. Money laundering, anti-terrorism legislations, all this sort of stuff exists to limit the amount of access you have to equity in a property within the first 12 months, right? And the amount of things you're allowed to do with that property within the first 12 months, because real estate is point number one for money laundering. Right? It's one of the easiest places to money launder outside of like a laundromat or a dry cleaners or a nail salon, right? And so, there are limitations to what you can definitely get away with doing, and don't think that people won't see patterns, right? Because what you're really asking is, can I buy a rental property with 5% down, right? And that's what anyone who is looking in detail on files sees when they see that question is, can I buy rental properties with 5% down? And the short answer is no. You can buy owner occupied properties with 5% down, and what you do with them later is your business.
Plus, there are tax implications if you live in it for less than 1 year, because you might have to, if you sell it, you might have to pay capital gains tax, which will be a lot more. So again, talk to your accountant as well. But like Matthew said, we have to be careful and tread very, very carefully. And I just had one slide which actually talks about this. So we keep obsessing about interest rates, but there are opportunities, right? So, and the thing that we need to understand about house hacking is, number one, we need to understand that there are less buyers. We talked about this. There are more renters, and the higher rents will actually offset from the house hacked unit. It will actually offset for the interest rates. Nail down the location. Not all locations are the same when it comes to house hack. If you are buying in Kitchener, see if you can buy close to downtown, because that will be an amazing house hack if you want to Airbnb or whatever. There are certain good locations in good school districts as well, which might also work. Get a local realtor who understands zoning laws in the area. They can understand structure. For example, I was just, I think Matthew, I told you about this. I did put an offer on the Century home that I talked to you about. But the thing is that my numbers were not making sense at the number that they wanted, and I walked away from it, right? But the realtor was able to explain to me that it has good, like bones. We were ready to do 2 inspections on that, and everything was all set. But the realtor was amazing. They were able to tell me what we can and what we cannot do, because it was in a historic location. So there are certain things that you actually can't do with that property, and then know your numbers. That's what we did, right? We had a number of $630,000. The maximum we could do is $640 for that, and they were asking for $670, and we just walked away from it, even though we were very now getting to a point where we were like, no, we want this and we'll go to $640, but we need to keep emotion out. And the realtor actually asked us to walk away. And that's where good people will actually ask you, good realtors and good mortgage agents will actually ask you to walk away, because
100%.
Numbers just don't make sense sometimes.
You keep that realtor for life. The realtor that tells you to walk away from a deal, right, that doesn't work for you, is someone you keep on your side forever, right? Because they are rare and they are amazing when you have them, right? Because that's someone who's looking out for your best interests, right? Not pushing, not pressuring, not forcing you to pull the trigger on something that doesn't work, you know? I saw a really great one pop up here real quick. I'm on a work permit. It's a good idea to start looking to buy property. Always be looking. Here's the thing. Always be looking. Always be shopping. Always be learning. Always get into the market, right? Start walking through homes. You know, if you haven't walked through 10 homes before you buy one, start walking through 10 homes, right? Go look at 100 on MLS, right? Just get into the mindset of shopping for real estate, right? Don't look at it. The more we spend time studying and researching and looking at the stuff, the less emotional the purchase becomes.
Yeah.
Right. And emotional purchases are the mistake for any investor or anyone who wants to be an investor. The moment you buy emotionally, you probably made a mistake.
And I think that's where, Matthew, a good mortgage agent and a good realtor and a good lawyer will actually come in and say, okay, you're buying for yourself. You're getting emotional about this purchase. You're actually going overboard. Let's just, pull you back, right? So I think those people are not really emotionally involved as emotionally involved you are with that pretty foyer and the pretty, like the waterfall, island and stuff like that as you are, right? And I think those people are actually able to pull you away from deals that don't make sense. So I think that's really important, whether you're buying an investment or a property for yourself.
Absolutely.
There's one question on buying outside of Canada. Absolutely. If it makes sense, numbers make sense. Numbers are numbers, right? Whether it's Canada, US, India, whatever. If numbers are making sense for you, why not? It's just about, what markets you want to be exposed with. But down the line, I would want to be exposed to US market as well. Right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Find where you want your investments, right? Find where you want to spread yourself, right? Pick your risk. Look at the rewards, right? Where does it make sense for you, right? Where do you see yourself working, and do you have a good support network where you're going, right? These are very important things to trying to build up a portfolio.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much, Matthew, for joining us. I think we answered a lot of the questions here. I think house hacking is at least, at least people will start talking about this. Yep. And if you need any help, do reach out to me. I don't charge anything. I don't know why people think that I charge. I don't, but I do ask for a few more documents than, some of the other people. But yeah, that's just because I just value our 45 minutes. And when we are on those 45 minutes, I just want to know a few things so that I can just add more value, when we are talking. So yeah, definitely just watch out for my email after this. And let's start talking about house hacking or any purchase that you're making.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me back, Nav. I appreciate it.
All right. Have a good one, everyone. Thank you so much, Matthew. Bye.